Hey, it's me, John Beckerman, and you are watching the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. And coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. That's your bit, right? That's your bit.
That's my bit.
I'm doing your bit.
Thank you. La, 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 la.
Welcome once again to the Letterman podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. All right, I'm excited about this. And we had a few months ago, we had Hillary Rollins on, the daughter of Jack Rollins, one of the daughters of Jack Rollins. Tonight we got her sister. We got Francesca. I got the kid sister on. Francesca Rollins spent a lot of time around 30 Rock during the formative years of Late Night with David Letterman. She spent a lot of time behind the scenes. I actually thought that she was I knew she had a crew jacket, and I thought that she was actually an official intern. Turns out she just spent a lot of time there. But she tells a lot of stories about that, and of course, many stories about her dad, the legendary Jack Rollins. I talk a lot about Jack on this show because I'm fascinated with this guy. I really, really am. He is the blueprint and a caricature of something in pop culture, in showbiz, that just really at the same time doesn't exist. When you see a caricature of a showbiz guy with a cigar and a racing sheet, that's Jack Rollins. And David Letterman's, I think it's fairly safe to say David Letterman's first high power manager that he really ever had, the one he gelled with anyway, the one who really somebody said to me the other day, and I mentioned this in the episode, maybe even a couple of times, but the idea that Jack and others, but we're looking at making the next Johnny Carson with Dave, and what a concept that is. So Francesca comes on here, and I mean, she's so thoughtful and sweet, and I mean, she allowed me to we've become friends throughout this process, and I'm really grateful that she allowed me to she opened up the door here with the camera on, and I appreciate that very, very much. She's extremely thoughtful, extremely sweet, and loves her dad to no end. And we have a lot of really cool stories here, mostly that focus on the early incarnation of the run of David Letterman, the early days. And it's great to have her here. The Letterman podcast is proud to present my conversation with Francesca Rollins. I've been looking forward to this for months. I'm so excited, Francesca, to have you on here. We had your sister on. Oh man, we had your sister on a while back, and we've been obviously had a lot of sideline conversations and things that are happening behind the scenes,
Sure.
stuff that we'll reveal moving forward. And you know what? Maybe some of the things we talk about today will be a part of those things. What are we talking about? Who knows? But regardless, I'm so excited to have you on here.
Thank you.
The part of Hollywood royalty, of showbiz royalty, the daughter of Jack Rollins, one of the daughters of Jack Rollins, but also lots of relationship with Late Night with David Letterman and all sorts of things, all of these things mashing together. Francesca Rollins, welcome to the Letterman podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Mike. I'm excited.
I'm glad we got to know each other.
Yeah.
I'm super stoked about all the things we've talked about up to this point.
Me too.
Lots of good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna get to Jack stuff for sure,
Okay.
but I want to start with Dave stuff. Because really at the end of the day with Jack Rollins, we can talk about this a little bit to kind of set the stage. They discover this guy named David Letterman, and they basically set out to make the next Johnny Carson. In my opinion, that's the way I see it. And other people see it as well. So the goal is to get him on the Tonight Show. They get him on the Tonight Show. Let's get him a morning show. They got him the morning show. The morning show doesn't work out. Let's get him a really solid holding deal. The holding deal happens, and then Late Night with David Letterman happens, and everything changes, and the magic all happens. And a big chunk of that is because of how your dad helped shape some of these things. Where are you during that process? What's your first memory of a guy named David Letterman coming into the the radar of your dad?
Okay. So I am in high school.
Yep.
And Dave was originally with the West Coast office.
Yep.
There, who discovered him because he was working out here at the Comedy Store and other clubs in LA.
Yep.
And it was Charlie and Larry and Buddy who were, brought him into the office. So that's the first time I heard of him. That was the situation. And then it was a lot of hullabaloo because he was coming to New York. That was a big thing, and Dad was going to meet him, and you know, how was that going to go? So there was a lot of sort of nervous chatter at home about that a bit. My sisters were out of the house at this point, both of them. So I was, I felt kind of an ownership in a way of the Letterman show, or I felt I had access in a way that it's not that they didn't, but they were already older and off having kind of their own lives. And I lived at home, obviously through high school, but then I also lived at home through college, and the college years were
NYU?
No, Marymount, Manhattan.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And so I lived at home, but I had enormous amounts of freedom to come and go and do as I pleased, which was wonderful. But what I wanted to do really was to hang out at the Letterman show as much as possible, because why wouldn't I? And
were you going to 30 Rock at this time? Because Jack had an office there, right? He had an office. And again, let's set a stage here too. One of the things that your dad was a pioneer of was the idea that a manager would actually be an executive producer of shows or films or things like that. And in a sense, sort of helped from a revenue perspective. I mean, there's a couple different ways you can look at it, but really at the end of the day, if the network's paying him his fee, then Dave or the talent isn't necessarily paying the manager fee on that, because he's producing executive producer of the show. And that was really something that he started. It didn't exist before then, that these managers or people who were in the creative space in that role would have their own kind of production deals. This is something that he brought to it. And so when Late Night with David Letterman began, an executive producer credit was given to Jack Rollins, including an office, and you got to use 30 Rock as kind of a playground. Do I have that right?
Well, somewhat, yes, somewhat. But I think the roots of this from my father date back to Cavett. And the Dick Cavett show at ABC. So he didn't have a specific office there, but he was very much there on a very regular basis. And I think for the client, that was a natural, the idea of being an executive producer and having in an office and being on campus, so to speak, was a natural progression, because the relationship between a manager and their client is so intimate and personal that very often the clients, you know, would feel better to have their manager nearby. It's like having their, you know, it's
your squad, it's your safety, it's your support system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that Dad's experience with Cavett influenced later, you know, the need and the desire to be around for Dave. And I think Dave also wanted that. I think he wanted Dad to be there, you know, when he came to New York. You know, that was a conscious choice to be in New York and be a New York guy and not a West Coast guy. And so if this relationship didn't work, it wasn't going to work. And so it did. And that, I think Dave very much appreciated and wanted Dad around in the early days. Later, maybe not so much, which is also totally normal and reasonable. I understand, but certainly in the early days, it was a safety thing. Like, somebody here has my back, and I want to check in with them.
Let's talk about 30 Rock for a second. Like, I mean, you know, this iconic building that the stories that have been layered for generations of in the annuals of broadcast history and entertainment history and a lot of other histories too, probably. You're just out of high school and college, whatnot, and suddenly, like, is this the first time that you have spent time in 30 Rockefeller Center, and did it capture you?
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I didn't, I spent some time there. I mean, by this point, by the time the show was on, I was in college, as I said, and
Yep.
and I was also busy um, with college life. So,
Mhm.
but if there was somebody on the show, like my dad would give me the heads up, you know, if he knew there was somebody going to be on that he knew that I wanted to see,
Yep.
and then friends would always, hey, can you get tickets? Can we go?
Oh
I
yeah,
was
I'm sure you had lots of
always
that.
I was always bringing folks over there. I had a friend from high school, um, who I who I c- I don't know what her exact title was, but I did get her a job on the show,
Yeah.
and she was very so she was sort of a conduit. So I might go in and see my dad,
Right.
say hello for a few minutes, but then I would be hanging with Maureen and Ed Hall and Robert
Amazing.
Morton and like
Yep.
all the rest of
The
and there
family.
was the family, had going out and yeah, hanging around
Okay.
the green room. It was fun. It was
It's
really fun.
interesting here. Okay, so first off, do you remember some of those names? Like early on, so and so is going to be on the show. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about comics that you would have known
Um,
growing up because of dad's in the business? Is it people who were celebrities that you just wanted to see? Do you remember any specific ones that you went to go see?
well, there were comics that he had, the clients of his.
Yep.
Jake Johansson
Yep.
was going to be on, or Paula Poundstone was going to be on, and so he'd say, like, yeah, come see, uh, you know, come see them. Yeah,
Yeah.
great, and sure, I'd go in for that. Um, the one that I remember the best was in the summer of '84,
Yep.
uh, right after the Born in the USA album came out, and he told me that Springsteen's band,
The E Street Band was going to be
the
playing
E
with the.
Street Band,
Yep.
was going to
Yep.
be there. And I lost my mind because I already had tickets. I already
Yep.
had tickets to see them. I think they were doing 6 shows at the Meadowlands,
Yep.
and I had tickets for at least one of, but maybe 2 of them.
Hmm.
And I went to the taping, and oh my God, my heart, I was, I walked in down that hall. There was a little hall with a makeup room and the green room, and then double doors that opened out onto the stage, and that was where you would enter,
Yep.
and I'd go through there, and then I could go up, and they had like a few chairs set aside, and I could sit there for the actual taping.
Yep.
And as I walked by, I poked my head into the green room, and I was flipping out because there was
There's
Gary.
Clarence Clemens.
There was Gary Talent, and there was, everybody. They
Yep.
were all there. I was just, and then so that was something. Then at when the taping was done,
Hmm.
came out to, I think I went to say hello to my dad for a few minutes, and I came out to the lobby, and I'm standing there waiting for the elevator.
Yep.
And I'm standing there, and I'm standing with Gary Talent and his girlfriend at the time, and we're waiting for the elevator. And
Hmm.
so I'm trying, to be cool,
Sure.
and not be like a gushy freak. So I'm minding my own business and sort of make eye contact with the girlfriend, and she makes eye contact with me, and we make some small talk. And how'd you think it went tonight? And oh, it was awesome, and you guys were amazing. And then she sort of opened up. I said, I'm a big fan. I'm going to see the show, whatever, Tuesday night. As we're getting into the elevator, she says, well, do you want to come see some, you're welcome to come see some more shows. When do you want to come? And I was speechless, and I was like, really? She said, oh, I'll get you as many tickets. How many do you want? When do you want to go? I tell what, here, take my number. She gives me her phone number. She call me tomorrow, and then just come down to the loft. Yeah, it was insane. So things like that happened. I sat in the friends and family section at Meadowlands 3 days later, and because of that moment at the
at the Letterman show,
at the elevator bank at the Letterman show. I mean, so many weird little rarefied moments like that.
Before we get to you spending more time there and in the internship and all that sort of stuff and whatnot, like, here's something that's really cool. You worked with Dave Rogalski, right? Would you have worked with Dave Rogalski, the writer? Maybe it might have been a little bit after your time. I'm not sure, but he's a writer.
Might have been
there.
After my time.
Yeah, you were there early. You were there early on for sure.
I was not working.
Well,
I did not have an internship.
Oh, you didn't have the internship there.
No,
okay.
No.
Okay.
No, I just was.
You were just there. Okay. You were just there. Okay. So there's a guy by the name of Dave Rogalski, and he was a prolific writer on Late Night with David Letterman. And he was there, second, third generation in, after Jim Downey and them left again to go back to, he came in after that. Okay. But when he came in though, he was a college student when Late Night debuted, when the morning show debuted, and then when Late Night debuted, he was a college student, and he literally watched the transition with the people at college who went from idolizing show business to now making fun of show business, chiefly because of what Late Night with David Letterman was doing and how much it impacted the college scene. It was the college kids that really lit the fire. You were in college while that was happening. Did you see it happening around you and then knowing, holy smokes, my dad's a part of this and something's happening here?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And there was lots of talk about it. It was a unifying thing. It was the water cooler talk for our generation, right? Yep. It was, it was, we all didn't, who had jobs that they had to get up to go to, right? We had in class, and you could wander into class and be whatever. So we could stay up late and watch the Late Night, which we did. So then the next day would be like, did you see Dave last night?
Yep.
That bit was so funny, and da-da-da-da-da. And then, of course, when Dad started doing bits on the show, then that became a thing, and he started turning into a celebrity in his own right.
Sure. Did all your friends know that that's your dad at this point? Like, is that a known thing, or did you keep it kind of on the down low?
That's a really good question. I mean, I didn't advertise it, except to say that there was the occasion where I might be wearing my Late Night jacket, which I did have and loved. And wore, but I wasn't overt about it. We had been trained as kids to very much downplay, while at the same time also enjoying, like, we were also invited to invite our friends to things, to include our friends. And so, yes, so friends certainly knew, and I hope I was generous whenever I could be.
Yeah.
But I also there was a fine line of humility and I don't know how to.
I see you're trying to figure out a balance.
Yeah.
And it's a balance on a balance beam that really is unique. It's a unique one that has unique curves and levels to it. And you're just trying to negotiate the best way to do it. There's party that can celebrate these things and really embrace them and enjoy them. But at the same time, there is that line. Well, it's funny talking to the staff, like the later generation staffs, even the ones that went to the CBS show and whatnot, when they got their jobs, somebody made this I actually know it was Don Giller now that I think about it. At a certain part of Late Night, the writers were of a certain age, and then as Dave aged, the writers many times stayed the same age, right? And so they're bringing on new, younger writers, and so now you're bringing on people who have an absolute like worship and reverence for the show, and they have a similar balance that they have to adhere to. They're like, okay, you know what? This is the thrill of a lifetime. It's the only thing I want to do. It's going to be the highlight of my life. And for many, it has stayed the highlight of their life.
Right.
But I can't show that. I've got to be too cool for school a little bit. I've got to,
Exactly.
yeah. And so you had a little bit of that too. You had a lot of that, it sounds like, actually.
Yes, I had a lot of that. I had a lot of that.
Your dad, and one of the things, we're working on a project here, and so I'm learning a lot of things about your dad. And someone just said to me yesterday, you won't see a picture of Jack Rollins without bags under his eyes. And the reason is because he would stay at the comedy clubs to the very end. He'd be out late all night. He'd be the guy. He was so dedicated to it. And your sister has talked about how she fell in love with stand-up. And she went down that path in a huge way for her because she was exposed to it. So at such an early age. Did you fall in love with stand-up as well, and the culture in the comedy scene?
I did. I did,
Yeah.
for sure. But I wanted to be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
I was also intimidated by stand-up.
Yep.
But I felt very comfortable in that world because we spent a lot of time in the clubs. She waitressed
Mm-hmm.
at the comic strip, so she was really in it.
Yeah.
And I was in it much more as a audience member.
The family business kind of a thing,
Yeah,
more than
yeah.
anything, but not okay.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
but it was fun. But again, it was because I had grown up in it and knew so many of the players. I could, for instance, you know, if we were out and about or bored of a Friday at midnight or whatever, I could say, "Hey, let's go over to Catch and see who's up, see if they'll." And I could go in and talk to Rick Newman and say, "Hey, can you take me and my friends?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, sure, come on in," and he'd give us a table.
Immediately knowing that's Jack's daughter. Like
Yeah,
you're
100%. He
you're
knew me.
Jack's daughter at this point in this. That's how you're viewed. Like everybody's like, oh, that's
It's Jack Rollins' daughter, so
yeah.
make nice. Yeah. Mhm.
Did you ever find anybody that you ever put your dad's eyes on?
Um, yes,
Yeah.
several times. Not that it was official.
Yeah.
Hillary did that much more than I did.
Yep.
But I remember I went one night. My friend Kelly and I, we were in college together.
Mm-hmm.
She was a singer and an actress. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. Anyway, one night, Kelly and I go to a piano bar on 8th Avenue. It doesn't exist there any longer. And there was a comedy, because she wanted to go to see this comedy duo. Of course, I'm not going to remember their names. They were hilarious. Two men. One played piano and they did songs and patter together. They were Tracy and
Okay, keep going.
I don't remember. Anyway, I saw a comic there. It was like an open mic night type thing. And this woman came on stage and she was startling and hysterical and unlike anything I had ever seen before. She was gentle and soft spoken and very feminine and completely charming and disarming. And I went home and made note of her name. And I went home, and that night I told my father, "Listen, I just saw somebody tonight at this little piano bar on 8th Avenue, and I think she's really special, and you should see her, and you should see her work." He was always looking for comedians, and always had a terrible time finding. And I said, "Her name is Rita Rudner."
That was my guess. I wish I would have. Oh,
Yes,
the way you described
yes.
her, I'm like, I think you're talking about Rita.
Of course.
I adored Rita growing up because of that. Her unique delivery was just picture
unique.
perfect. Oh yeah.
Completely unique. And he did actually come see her. And he was like, "Yes, I agree." I don't know what happened, I don't know if they ever actually spoke. He didn't manage her. I think she had management.
Yep.
I think her husband or something.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but it didn't work out. But I remember that one time that he did follow up and actually agreed with me and was like, oh yes, she's fabulous. She's
Oh, is
unique and
she
amazing.
ever? She's
Yeah.
fantastic. Just out of, I don't think this is the one. It's not Tracy and Martina, is it?
No, no.
Okay, they're Canadian,
Trace.
so that's that's where I was thinking it might have been. They're a comedy duo from Canada, but
Ah,
anyway, that's charming. That like the unique feeling that you would have seeing that and being able to kind of make a call or make something happen. That's not something that most humans get. Like, I mean, sure, we recommend our friends for jobs and things like that, or whatever. We use recommendations and things.
right.
Boy, what a unique place, a unique
Yeah.
viewpoint that you had.
You want to
You
know
know,
but the flip side of it though?
please, yes, absolutely,
The flip side
absolutely.
is, there were a couple times where I was dating somebody. I had one guy break up with me because he finally came clean to the fact that he realized he was really after, seeking audience with Jack Rollins, and it wasn't so much about dating
Oh,
me.
that's a
Yeah.
tough pill to
So,
swallow.
it has it's yeah, it
And
has
then there were
its
probably some where you're like, "Hey, I'm Jack Rollins' daughter.
detractions.
Would you like to have a drink?"
I swear to God, I never used it. Never.
You didn't have to. So did you know early on? Because early on, you're obviously the Showbiz family, the Showbiz all around you, trying to say, but we're just regular folk. This is just something that we happen to do. That kind of, I know
Mhm.
that was the environment that was, attempted to be a part of, but at the same time, you got bit by it early.
Yes,
Acting was something you wanted to do early on.
when I was 6,
Oh,
5, 7, I don't know,
and was it
elementary
features?
school.
Was it TV? Was it Broadway? What bit you?
You know, I did a show in elementary school called The King's Cream Puffs. And boy, I don't know, getting that applause was, I
Yeah.
could get a laugh. I knew where the laugh was. I had timing. I had natural comic timing,
Yep.
which is not a huge surprise uh, because my mother was a performer as well.
Mhm.
Um, and she's supported my father before his career took off. So, there there was there was uh, you know showbiz in my blood unconsciously, I guess. So
Mhm.
yeah.
And how was the response of support or caution from mom and dad, as you're letting
Mm.
them know about this?
Oh, it's going to turn into a therapy session.
Let's do it.
Uh, um, I would say um, it was also a mixed bag.
Mhm.
I would say it was primarily positive, coming primarily from my mother,
Mhm.
who um, who saw everything I did and who uh, was an enormous supporter and a helpmate and uh, filled with ideas, and who really should have been a producer in her own right.
Mhm.
Um, and my father was late to the party for me in that regard,
Mhm.
and didn't really get on board until college.
Mhm.
And he came to see me in a show, um, a small thing that I did in like the little black box
Yeah.
at Marymount. And afterwards, he said, well, he said several things, one of which was not particularly complimentary, I thought, which was the first thing he said was, um, if you want to get a nose job, I'll pay for it. And but the second thing he said, which for our listeners, I did not take him up on. But the second thing he said was, you really showed me a lot of promise, and if you want to go to grad school, for acting. I think you could really do it, and I'll support that.
Wow.
So, but I was already 22.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But really a lot of the support came from mom along the way.
So, okay.
He wasn't around that much. He wasn't coming to the daily, he was either in the clubs.
These are the late nights we're talking about.
That's right. He was either in the clubs or he was at the track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The character that is Jack Rollins, I mean, there's so many people who have impressions of a guy like your dad that don't realize that it's your dad that they're imitating. Like, he really is a caricature in so many ways. The cigar and always the racetrack, the race,
but
sheet
always
with
a suit,
and always a suit
and hard-soled shoes.
There you go. There you go.
Always.
And he really was a caricature. He really is a caricature that exists in pop culture, and it can kind of be traced back to him. He really is, the stereotype of the stereotypical old school Hollywood manager guy, because that's the blueprint. It was all kind of made from him.
Old school, and definitely not Hollywood. Old school New York.
Oh, so you're right. Show business is where I was going. You're right. Yes, and that's a better word for it than Hollywood.
And I will say also, I used to spend a lot of time with him going to the racetrack. I spent a lot of time with him at the racetrack, by the way.
Did he ever win big? Did he win big ever?
Not usually, but he also didn't lose big because this was the other very interesting part about him. He loved the racetrack. And by the way, for the record, not the thoroughbreds. He did not go to the thoroughbred track. He was purely interested in the standard breds, which are the guys in the sulky.
Yeah.
Like the old-timey country fair races with the yeah.
Why was that?
I think because it appealed to his blue-collar working man kind of approach. The thoroughbreds were always, that was elite.
Yeah.
Those were wasps. Those were the people with money.
Yep.
Those were the East Side. Those were not his people. And because he was just a schnook from Brooklyn, so I would go to the track with him often and marvel at the fact that you could pick him out of the crowd anywhere, Yonkers, Roosevelt, Meadowlands, hundreds of people, but he'd be the only person there in a suit.
Yeah.
And hard-soled shoes and a tie. He looked like the accountant, the auditor for the racetrack or whatever. And he had all these buddies, friends there, and they'd all be kind of these, I don't know, messy, rough and tumble.
Mm-hmm.
But he looked ever the gentleman.
Well, there's a metaphor here, a very, very simple one that, what was Jack Rollins known for as a manager? He was known for bringing that, absolutely, and there's a whole bunch of class, ethics in a huge way. Never poach a client, like things like that. But also, the guy who was really good at taking the diamond in the rough and polishing it off, and turning it into that diamond. It's interesting that the race sheet that he's looking at isn't the thoroughbreds, but it's those ones.
That's correct. And the reason why he never really, you're exactly right, Mike. That's so insightful, because his obsession with the harness track was living out daily, working out in his mind daily, searching for exactly what you're describing. The way he would handicap a racing form would be, he never, ever bet on anything that was, a 2-to-1 or, whatever.
The favorite.
Never, not with a gun held to his head. Never. he would look for that diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
And he didn't make a lot of money. No, he didn't win big, but he also didn't lose big because he only ever bet. They used to have a thing called a quinella.
Okay.
Well, first it was called you could bet to win, place, or show, obviously, and then there was a thing called oh God, my brain is so dead. Where you would guess first and second.
Okay.
But then they started a new thing called a quinella, which meant
Yeah.
it could come in first and second, or
Okay.
reverse.
Okay. Yeah.
The second horse could, and you would win either way. And that was a $1 bet. So on a $1 bet, how much money could you make? If he won big, he won $17.
Yeah.
That night. Oh, and he would come home sometimes despondent. I mean, just lower than low. And he'd say, Jane, had a terrible night at the track. Just terrible. And she'd say, well, okay, well, what happened? How much did you lose? $6. For real. And he was not trying to be funny. He absolutely was mortified that he had lost $6.
But Woody won the Academy Award, so it's okay. But I lost $6.
My mother'd be like, Jack, it's $6. Did you have a good time? Well, yes. Okay. So.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Did you ever smoke cigars?
I have smoked cigars.
Yeah?
Yes. They're awful. I don't know how he did it.
Well,
he only smoked.
Yeah.
You know the story of why he did?
No, please tell me the story of why
he was
did.
A cigarette smoker.
Okay.
And he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, this stuff is bad for you. And he's like, but I'm addicted. And the doctor was once said, just smoke a cigar. You don't inhale them.
Yes.
Yes. That was it. He was like, oh, okay.
I'm a financial planner by trade. Okay. And part of that financial planning business is life insurance. Folks who are cigarette smokers, the cost is, let's call it double. The cost of insurance is about double if you're a smoker. But if you declare on the application that you smoke, a Cuban cigar every week or whatever, you're not even classified as a smoker. Like
amazing.
It's yeah. And it's funny because I smoke Cuban cigars. I usually I'll do one a month. I've got a nice humidor upstairs from Canada, right? So I've always been able to get Cubans, no problem.
Oh, right.
And okay, the reason that I got into it was because of David Letterman. And I've always wanted to know, did David Letterman get into smoking cigars because of your dad?
I think so.
There you go. So if that's the case, thank you, Jack. I do love, I'm going to have one tonight. I'm going out on the patio tonight and I'm having one. There's been a lot of Jack Rollins in my life over this last week, and I'm actually going to go out and I'm going to smoke a cigar and I'm going to think about
on
your
his
dad
behalf.
tonight.
Oh,
absolutely.
So nice.
Absolutely.
That's
Not
great.
the first time I've done it either.
Awesome.
But it's funny because that habit that I have, or it's not even a habit. It's a pleasure that I have. It's an experience that I have every now and then. Tangentially is connected to your dad, and I didn't even know that up until this point here. But I always suspected it was the case.
Yes. I still, when I smell it, I love, I mean, I hated living with it, but now when I smell it, I walk by, I'm so nostalgic and I miss him.
Can we talk about Broadway Danny Rhodes for a second here?
Sure.
Danny Rose. The scuttlebutt is that it's hopefully we can go to the source and find out, but the scuttlebutt is, of course, that it was inspired largely by your father. And I'm curious about your take on it.
It's never, I would be interested to really myself to hear what Woody has to say about that. I think it's probably more accurate to say that elements of him are inspired him or were in there. It's certainly not like an exact,
no,
obviously. But I would think even if it was unconscious, I'm sure that there, to some degree, he's in there.
Yeah.
And then it was really great that he got to be in it and that Woody asked him to to be one of the guys around the table, you
At
know,
the
in the
deli.
deli.
In the deli, yeah.
Oh God. And Dad came home. He came home one night and he said, "Oh, Jane, I'm terrible. I've ruined the film. I've ruined it. They're going to have to throw out all the footage. It's just, I'm so bad. I'm a terrible actor." And Mom was like, "What are you?" He said, "Oh, and as what is true is that they did cut a bunch of his his lines. He
Oh, they
doesn't
did.
have
Okay.
a lot of lines left. He did have a lot more to start with,
Uh-huh.
and he probably is not a very good actor, but you know, Woody kept some stuff in there. But I remember him saying like, "Oh, it's not my thing. He was too self-conscious." Anyway,
But we
yeah,
think maybe not direct inspiration, but a little bit, as the kids like to say, a little bit of homage. A little bit of homage there. There would be fair to
probably
say for sure. And well, hopefully we get to explore this a little bit more.
a little bit. I
moving
think
forward.
Woody had a lot of I mean, I know that they really had a lot of love and mutual respect
Mhm,
for each other. That
mhm.
really was real and genuine and, you know, and deep.
I
And
oh,
I,
go ahead. No,
oh, I
please.
was just going to say, and I think that a lot of my parents' friends, when they saw Broadway Danny Rose, felt that it was, you know, that the character of Broadway Danny Rose was uh, that Woody was somehow, you know, that he's like this kind of a loser kind of guy,
Yep.
you know, an ambulance chaser equivalent, right? And that he's not so classy and not, you know, erudite and all those things that they thought my father was, and they thought it was disrespectful to him and all this
Mhm.
sort of thing. But I that's why I say I don't think it's a direct correlation. I think he took sort of a kernel or some little elements and you know, created something else out of that.
Well, and how many stand-up bits? I mean, you and I have been around enough comedy, both of us, to know you way more so than me that you see a comic up on stage and they take a little teeny tiny kernel of truth and then they
Sure.
start spinning a yarn,
Sure.
and the yarn comes out of that little kernel of reality, of relatability, and it turns into, you know,
Exactly.
a fishing story at that point.
Exactly.
And so, but the kernels and some of the things that inspired
Right.
these things that turn into that. Okay.
Right.
Um, it's funny. I love stand up and I love going back and looking at the history of it. I have said this in the past without necessarily knowing the Jack connection of the development of Woody Allen, but I've gone back and looked at a lot of the Woody Allen stand up that's available
Hmm.
to be seen. I really liked Woody Allen as a stand up, especially when you take into consideration the time and the place and where stand up was kind of in its infancy in many respects. I really enjoyed Woody Allen's stand up, and I just, the idea that your dad helped evolve him from who he was there on that stage to who he became. It's gigantic. It
It's
really, really is.
Yes, it is. It
You
really
know,
is. Do you know the story of how that all came to be?
I would love to hear it.
Can I
I would love to
share?
hear it. I would love to hear it from your standpoint, Francesca.
Okay. So Woody had a job writing, a very good job. He had a wife and a job and a life.
Hmm.
He wrote for, I believe, Jack Parr,
Hmm.
and was making a very good living, and came knocking on the door. He had heard of Rollins and Jaffe because of, I guess, Nichols and May at that point, and Belafonte, and Felicia Sanders, and Charlotte Rae, and some other people. And so word had gotten around, and he had an office on 57th Street.
Hmm.
Um, we used to talk about we used to tease him that he was the mayor of 57th Street. That was what we called him. And
Grandiose office.
no,
When?
not at
Oh,
this
that wasn't
time.
that one.
At this
Okay,
time, it was a very modest second
okay,
floor. It was up a same street, just up on
just
7th Avenue.
down the block. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And Woody came and knocked on the door looking to sell material. You know, he had a bunch pages of jokes and things that he'd written, and he was looking to, you know, it was a little side gig to sell some jokes to some comics, as writers did in
Yep.
those days, because stand-ups bought material. They didn't write their own material.
Yep.
They bought jokes
Yep.
from joke writers. That's how it went, right? So he came there to say, you know, do you have clients who might be interested in your material? And Dad said, we don't. But if you would like to read me a couple, you know, while you're here, I'm happy to hear them, and maybe I can steer you in the right direction or something like this. So the story goes that Woody and Charlie was there too. And he said, okay, sure. And he put his pages up like this and started reading the jokes. And Charlie and Dad were falling out of their chairs. They were laughing so hard.
Because it's Woody Allen delivery, but you don't know it's Woody Allen delivery when you're
that's right.
that
just
guy.
Reading, and I said it, and just looked like, then he's reading like this, like, you know, like he's reading a grocery list, whatever it is, and he had no abilities as a performer at that time. He wasn't a performer; he was just a writer.
Yeah,
and they howled with laughter. At the end of which they said, "Look, we think your material is brilliant, genius, but Dad said, there is nobody who can do this material. You have to do this material yourself." And he said, but I'm not a performer. I don't do stand-up. And Dad said, I understand, but that there's nobody, he said, there's nobody, certainly nobody that no, there's just nobody who's going to be able to deliver this besides you.
Yeah.
And if you ever change your mind and you want to do this, you let me know. And that was it. And a year went by, you know, it wasn't an immediate thing. And a year later, Woody came knocking again and said, well, I'm thinking maybe you're right. I'd like some help. Would you consider blah, blah, blah. And that's how they started working together. Yeah.
And so during the stand-up years of Woody, your dad's already directly involved in how that evolved. And then also there in the evolution to filmmaker, all 100%, of the
100%. Because Woody, as I said, because he wasn't already doing this, and he didn't want to do this. And you can tell he didn't want to do it when you see video of him on stage where he is so uncomfortable.
It's fantastic. It's so great.
He's getting himself caught in the cord on the microphone. Dad said he used to have to literally push him on stage at night.
Oh my gosh.
Literally push him and say, you can do this. Because he would go out on, you know, the bitter end or wherever it was, that there'd be two people laughing. Charlie and Jack. Every night. And that's so disheartening for a comic, right?
Sure.
I mean, can you imagine?
Yes.
Every night you get out there and the same two people are laughing at the same jokes, and nobody in the audience, they stared at him. They didn't know what this was, because they were used to, you know, Henny Youngman and Shecky Green, and
it was a different deal. And different. You think about guys like Woody and Carlin and some of these people who started bringing the individual voice to it. And again, lots of parallels. Like I look at a guy, okay, let's bring it back. We're the Letterman podcast. Let's talk about Dave for a second. I mean, how many hilarious things have been said? I used to be that kid, you know, and the times where you were hanging around in the hallways and hobnobbing with these people that I just worshiped. I used to be the kid that would try and articulate something that Dave said from the night before, and it doesn't work because only Dave can take that. And sometimes it's a turn of phrase. It's a switching of the punctuation a little bit. It's accentuating a certain word, and it's completely unique. And the delivery is from that person, you know, and Woody Allen certainly has a style of his own, and that can be certainly said for him as well. But think about another guy like Robert Klein, and it's same thing. Like, don't get me wrong. I can recite Opera Pimp. I can talk about the Opera Pimp bit, and it's phenomenal. It's great, but nobody says it the way Robert Klein says it, and it's unique to him. And it's
it.
interesting. There's probably, as we go down the list of people that Jack worked with, there's probably a lot of people on that list who could probably say the same thing.
Yes.
Uniqueness. Exactly. He could find and spot uniqueness.
That's right. And draw that out and increase it. Bring it along, as he would say. Bring it along.
Dad would say that. Let's bring it along. What are some other Jackisms?
He used a lot. He used a lot of racing metaphors. One activity definitely informed the other, I can tell you. Because when a horse is coming along, it would be the same thing as if a comic were coming along.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Yeah, the development of their skill and their confidence. Yeah.
Do you still hear his voice?
Oh, yeah.
What are some of the things that you hear?
Well, things like that, like phrases like that, where he would say, he would use this term. I use it now. I used it with my kids when they were looking at colleges, and I'm using it now working with high school seniors in college counseling for early decision phenomenon, which, is a binding contract. And I always say, and this is something that Dad would say, he would say, well, is there in the world of the racetrack, it would be if there was a horse that laid over the field. That's how he would express it. So I would say to my kids, is there a school that lays over the field? Then that's the one that you're applying ED to. If there isn't one, there isn't one, but it has to lay over the field.
It helps suddenly focus exactly to where, like to laser sharpen the focus a little bit.
There's all these horses, but is there one that I don't know where he got that from, but is there one that lays over the field? And he would use terminology like that in the world of comedy as well. Coming along. If a horse won something by a nose, he might say the same thing for, for, let's say, the Academy Awards, like maybe they won by a nose or by a head or by a length.
Did he ever get swept up in it? He loved show business, obviously. Did he ever get swept up by it? Or was he always surfing the wave? He was always surfing it. Okay.
Never. Because when you say he loved it, he didn't necessarily love it. He didn't love it. He was really good at it. Okay. He was really good. Yep. And he or maybe he loved it and didn't express it in quite the same way. He was never, it was about the work. Yep. It was about the finding the thing and doing the work and having the comic come along and making the deal at UA or wherever it was, making and seeing this thing. He enjoyed that creative process. Yep. But he was not the guy who was interested in the trappings. Right. Or who enjoyed any of the pomp and circumstance. That didn't even it didn't mean anything to him. It didn't mean anything to him. And if that had only been true for Charlie, that would have been good. But sadly, it was not the case. Charlie was a good time Charlie, and he did fall victim to all the trappings of Hollywood. And
pretty easy.
It's very easy. It's very easy. But one of the reasons I think Dad didn't, well, lots of reasons. It wasn't who he was. Yep. In his core, in his soul. Yep. And he never left New York. Right. And he refused to leave New York. And he hated California.
So going out for the Oscars, that was not a fun time. He didn't enjoy.
Oh my God, he hated it, and he was adamant and very vocal about what he hated. Yeah.
Rick Scheckman told me a couple of stories about Jack, traveling with Jack back in the day to the Emmy parties and things like that.
Right.
Because late night, of course, late night gets thrust into this spotlight, and it's like literally not ready for primetime players kind of a mentality there. They're just, a lot of these people have got their heads down so deep in the sand as to what it is they're doing. And then, we do a show to LA and suddenly they realize, oh, the lineup is around the block for people who just want a glimpse of the show, your dad must have really been proud at the ascent of what happened. That's a question I want to ask, because, these comics that were coming along and whatnot, and he helped nourish this. Did he get proud of some of these accomplishments that these people were achieving the way that a father would, like as Billy Crystal's career, developed and all these things start to happen? Is there a sense of vicarious, almost parental pride that he had for these people? Yeah,
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Was that
And
weird being his kid seeing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a little weird. It's a little
Was
weird.
it took me till college for him to even notice that that I had acting ability. Like, was there some of that there? Yeah.
For sure. I used to always say that if I wished sometimes I would wish, gosh, if my father had only been a plumber, I would, I could get on stage, whatever I do, he'd think was fantastic.
Yeah,
But
it's a
my father
hell of a yardstick you're up
knew
against.
knew the difference, right? Oh God, it was rough. Yeah, sure, of course. And I had to share him with these people, and these people were important people.
Did any of them become family in your mind?
That's a really complex question, because well, the stories about, like, for instance, Woody, he really was very much family in the very early days when I was very little. So that's before I was really all that aware or conscious. As his career grew, their lives, even though their professional life was still connected, their personal lives started to veer, right? But Mom always said, oh, Woody taught you how to walk. He was the one that taught you how to walk. So, what can I say? So I guess that's sort of family-like, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we had special relationships with Robin and with Billy, that I believe was authentic. But it was not in a day-to-day way.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel what you're saying.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there's not a bond. Like, it's a unique bond.
There's a connection.
That's there. There's a connection there. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But
not
but
necessarily with Dave, by the way.
Well, and I mean, this is one of the things that I really like to explore. Like, again, the idea that I was talking to Morty about this the other day, and when he kind of laid out the idea, that your dad and company were basically wanting to blueprint and make the next Johnny Carson, not blueprint him, but make the next Johnny Carson. And that was an intentional kind of an idea that they were doing with Dave. I mean, it doesn't, doing that can be strictly professional. It doesn't have to be beyond that, but I can imagine that during those early years with Dave, that there would have been a lot of reliance on, like, I think about a guy like Hal Gurney. The thing I loved about late night so much, and the morning show as well, because a lot of that crew just transferred over, is you have this alchemy of old school show business at the highest level, and then new
young voices.
And they put them all together and mashed them like two Play-Doh colors and to make a new color completely. And your dad certainly in the former, Hal Gurney certainly in the former, some of these other people who've been around forever, you know,
Yeah.
but not so entrenched in the former that they're not willing to look at new and creative and okay, let's take this and turn it on its ear. And it's just interesting to me how your dad was a part of that and the role he played in that.
There were times when sometimes, to be honest, he would come home and be like, I don't know. These folks, yeah, they think this shit is funny. I don't know. To me, it's absolutely sophomoric, but whatever. They think it's funny.
I love that.
Okay. You know,
do you remember an example of that? Like, do you remember of an example of anything that happened on late night where your dad was just kind of, I don't get it, or just like,
well, yeah, like when they would drop stuff from, drop things out the window or from the rooftops. He'd be like, what?
oh, that's
These
great.
are like pranks we did in junior high school. That's the level.
Oh, that warms my heart so much. He's shaking his head at what the kids are doing. Like
Yeah.
that is just. But riding the wave when the popularity takes off with it, obviously, okay.
Oh, yeah, sure. He'd get on
sure.
board. Yeah, of course. I mean, he got on board enough to do bits on the show,
Yeah.
which he really had a fun time with.
He did. He enjoyed that.
Oh, yeah,
So,
he enjoyed that.
you know, Broadway Danny Rose, not necessarily the funnest experience, but he enjoyed doing the late night bits.
Oh, yeah. Those were absolutely, like with Biff.
Yep.
Or Chris Elliott or whoever was being called in.
Yep.
Yeah, he had a good time doing that. He didn't do them that often, but now and then.
Yep. He was part of it.
It was fun. It was fun for him. He had to join AFTRA.
Yeah.
For that.
There you go.
Completely tickled him. He was
Oh,
now
that's
a union member.
When you were there, did you know Meryl at all?
I did not. I think I met her once or twice. I didn't really know her. No,
so who were some of the people you talk about? Ed Hall, and by the way, I think maybe I did tell you this when I was in Cali. I have Ed Hall's Late Night with David Letterman jacket. I have his original Late Night with David Letterman jacket. Someone gave it to me. And I have that crew jacket. You still have yours? Do you still have your crew jacket?
I still have my sure.
Right on. Oh, that's excellent. It's
Yeah,
one of the originals, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Who are some of your running buddies at from there that you enjoyed spending time with?
I remember Pook.
Oh, let's talk about Bob Pook. Mark Carson is going to be so happy right now, and Bill Shortridge are going to be so happy right now. I was talking about Bob Pook. You remember Pook? Yeah.
Really talented guy. A lot of fun.
Yep.
I remember Pook. I remember Ed Hall. I spent a lot of time with Ed.
Yep.
Rick, of course.
Yeah.
And what's her name? Who left to become an actress in her own right. She was the most bubbly, wonderful assistant. Oh my God. It'll come to me.
Okay.
Other people have talked about her, I'm sure.
Okay. It'll probably come to me too. I don't know who you're referring to.
Early days. Marie O'Donnell.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Marie O'Donnell.
Yeah.
Bubbly, so fun. I adored her. Jude.
Yeah.
Brennan.
You and Jude Brennan. That's a person that there's a few people who are in the annuals of these people that I'm scared of. Jude is one of them. I'm intimidated by Jude.
Yeah,
just by reputation. I'm totally intimidated by Jude. I would have Jude on in a second if I could, to be perfectly frank. Rick gave me an email list and contact list. Some of it's accurate, some of it's not. I don't, some of it's old or whatever. I actually have an email for Jude and I haven't dared to email it. I'm just, I don't know what it is. I'm intimidated by Jude.
I don't blame you, but drop Hillary's name, my name, Dad's name.
Yep.
I think Jude would be amenable.
That would be a phenomenal conversation. I mean, the perspective from Jude about everything is one that fascinates me to no end.
Yeah. Jude came to the funeral and came back to the house afterwards, hung out.
Yeah.
I think you could do that.
Jack died in the same year he turned 100, right?
Yes.
He turned 100 and then it was within months that he'd passed. Yeah.
He turned 100 on March 23rd, 2015. And we had a party on April 8th.
Yep.
for him, and
Yeah.
everyone came. Klein. By the way, Klein is another one I want to mention who for sure feels like family.
Oh, I love hearing that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
I mean, I'm Facebook friends with him, and I was when Klein. I'll get back to that.
Yeah.
Just 1 second.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
a little tangent.
No, please.
To illustrate it, because I would feel bad if I didn't mention this. But when I was 10, Robert guest hosted the David Susskind show for a week. And one of his ideas for one of the show was that he wanted to talk to youth of today. And he had 3 kids on, me, Keith Gordon, who I knew and was friends with, who lived up my block from me and who later went on to become an actor and director, and another kid named Clarence something, and I don't remember his last name or whatever happened to him. But anyway, he had the 3 of us on, and we talked with Robert about zero population growth and pollution and all, whatever it was. So we go back, he and I, he still has the tape of that somewhere from when I was 10 years old. So yes, Robert feels like family. Back to my dad.
Steve Weiner, by the way, who I adore more than like he's, Shecky connected us way early on, and Steve and Lori and I are just amazing. And my wife and I, like they're family to us. We just adore them so much.
Lovely guy.
I love listening to Steve. Now, Steve only wrote for Dave for a year, but he can actually go into Dave Letterman voice with things from back then. But it's not as fascinating, not even close to as fascinating as to listen to him go into Klein's voice. It is amazing listening to Steve. Suddenly his cadence changes and he can come up with like modern lines on the fly that are in Robert Klein's voice. And that is to me, that is just endlessly entertaining. I'll never
wait till you see Klein's imitation of Dad that he does at the funeral. It's classic. Hilarious.
I wanted to ask, what had more laughs? Which had more laughs, the party or the funeral? Where were there more? I can imagine.
Hard to say.
That, yeah, exactly. That funeral is actually kind of legend. It's one of those legendary events that happened. But the party also, his 100th birthday party, also considered that way as well.
The party was amazing.
Yeah,
and everybody came. Woody, Cavett, Klein, everybody came.
It's amazing.
And then that was April 8th, and then he died June 18th. So
yeah.
But
unbelievable legacy.
The truly amazing story was, this will give you a clue. Okay.
Yep.
So my mother was gone already, and I was home for a Christmas vacation, and we're sitting, Dad and I were watching television, and Dad's like 90. He's 97 at this point. And I say to him, gosh, Dad, you're looking, your 98th birthday is coming up. 98. Wow. That is really something, huh? He said, yes, like this. I said, wow. What do you think? You going to aim for 100? He doesn't miss a beat. He looks at me with disdain and he says, well, what do you think I'm going to aim for? 99? I thought, yep, still got it.
Yep. And still with the dialect of the old showbiz dialect. That's a perfect, that line could be uttered in any decade from the 40s on. That's a great.
I think I'm going to aim for a 99. Who does that?
I want to talk a little bit more 30 Rock stuff if it comes to your head, more Letterman stories, that sort of a thing. And I do want to move to when, I believe there's irony attached to, the parting of the ways and things like that. I believe there is, it's an ironic thing in many respects when you zoom out and look at it. But I do want to talk about if there's any other, fond memories that you have from the Letterman show that have popped up in your head, knowing this past couple of weeks is that we're going to do this today. Anything else that has popped up that you remember really, as fond times there?
I mean, Dave was a little intimidating to me.
Yeah.
So even though I was there, he knew who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And he would say hello briefly. I
Mm-hmm.
never felt kind of entree
Yep.
with him
Yep.
the way I did with so many of the other clients. So I kind of, there was a sort of a distance that was okay.
Yep.
So my good times, my fun times hanging out there were not with him.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that many people would say as well. You know,
Yeah.
our show is about Letterman and Company, and the company
Right.
many times to me are like, and don't get me wrong, I believe David Letterman is the greatest broadcaster in history. I truly do. But it's David Letterman and Company because the company that were around him
Yes,
were at the highest level at whatever it is that they did from their perspectives as well.
that's correct.
Your dad being a chief example of that.
And they were all, to a person, really warm and
Yes.
friendly. It was as though he was allowed to be kind of chilly and on his own because everybody else could be so personable, and that was a good balance.
And he's the host. He needs to be the guy.
Right.
He's the guy. I mean, Dave has said it throughout his entire career. Everything rests and lays on
Sure.
him and what he does and his performance and all of that stuff.
Sure.
But the support team that he had around him was just astounding. Um, when it got to the end, you know, we're at this place where and this is a question I would love to ask him. I've asked many people around it, you know, with cameras off and whatnot. You know, the irony of ironies. You know, there's this very, very, very strong narrative that everybody seems to agree on, that David Letterman did not want to politic for the Tonight Show. He talked about a meeting that he had with Johnny Carson's lawyer, Mr. Bushkin, where they came along and they had this idea for a succession plan, and you know, he's been very public about this. And once he found out that Johnny really didn't know anything about it, he's like, don't let those people come in. Don't let those people ever have a meeting with me ever again. I do not want in any way, shape, or form to dishonor Johnny by making him think for a second I would betray him, including you know, from everything I've learned, the idea that saying to Jack Rollins, whose instincts are always to help grow his clients, but to give the instruction, don't put something in place of the Tonight Show. Don't politic for this job. Don't do this. That's the narrative that's kind of out there. But then when the time comes where the issue is being forced, suddenly, and here's the part that I kind of love about this when I think about your dad, you know, Letterman moves over, Mike Ovitz and CAA, and now what we have here are an old school, the guy who really created the blueprint, created the whole industry of talent management. And then you have people who kind of came up after him who went really big with it and took that blueprint and did something with it. And you've got this sort of, Mike Ovitz comes in and gets Dave the big CBS, you know, off a job, you know, after being courted by countless suitors as to where he's going to go next. And there's a split that happens. And I'm curious if you have any insights onto the split and how it made Jack feel at that time.
Yes, I do. He felt it was a double-edged sword for him.
Okay.
In some respects, he was happy to be done, specifically with Dave.
He's passing the baton.
Yeah, I mean, he, you know, at this point, who was he working with? Woody and Dave. You know, he didn't have, he had some newer clients who were, Rick Reynolds had made a run, and Jimmy Tingle had made a run, but neither one had really taken off, and now they had both sort of receded, and he was getting older, and you know, he didn't want to work that hard or be having to go in all the time or on the phone with Dave or whatever. He didn't want to do it that much anymore. And so on the one hand, I think he was relieved to be relieved of that responsibility.
Yep.
On the other hand, I know that he was also hurt and was somewhat bitter about feeling he felt squeezed out. He felt that he was not given a respectful way out, a comfortable way out, that it was sort of like that there wasn't a great deal of gratitude or acknowledgement, that it was just kind of like, well, thank you. Well, yes, of course, thank you for everything you've done, but I'm going to go this way from here on.
Yep.
In this direction, which is fine. Was his right, and his, it's perfectly fine. I think that Dad was, felt that a little more, he wasn't quite ready to do it. He wasn't quite ready to leave on his own.
Gotcha.
I think he would have liked to have made that choice of his own accord.
Right.
And if Dave had been gracious enough to sort of have him come along, and it would have happened naturally. He would have eased himself out of there.
Yeah.
But I think he felt, a little disappointed
and
that it happened the way it did.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think about, you go back to what you're describing here, and everything I've talked to you and Hillary and other people about, like back with the split with Harry Belafonte, that was a dramatic like there was a lot of real bitter tears and things with that, compared to this one here, where it's like, it's so, like, I find I love irony. Is my second favorite literary device. I love irony so much. And there's something almost ironic here, where you've got the old warhorse that really, and again, self-admittedly gets really excited about running when it's developing young talent, when it's taking the rocks and turning them into the diamonds. And then at that point there, the diamonds shine and they do their things. But really, it's not a matter of, okay, now we shine the diamond up that much more. Now it's kind of business as we go. And Dave was at a pivotal career juncture, where you had somebody come along who had really fancied themselves as taking the diamonds and now really shining up the diamonds and presenting the diamonds. Like to me, as awkward as sometimes as a baton handoff like that can be, it certainly wasn't the Harry Belafonte split in that regard. And no. So I hear where you're coming from. And I just wonder if Jack, when he saw Dave, who didn't get the Tonight Show, that was always what he wanted, but he basically got to take Johnny Carson's deal and sort of take it to CBS and extend it and grow it and make it this big thing. And that's because I think that was probably Ovitz's speciality.
Yes, it was.
There must have been, I just imagine, I wish I could ask your dad if there was some sort of professional kind of like, yeah, right on. Like a little bit of, that's cool. Like,
I mean, I think he probably felt that if this had all happened when he was a younger man, that he might have been the one to be able to do that.
Yep.
But at the juncture where, where he was, I think he was, I don't know how old he was when.
Oh, in 93, he's what? 80? He's in his 80s.
No, he's older than that.
There we go. So
he's older than that.
Well, somebody even said, Jack was old when he started working with us. Like
old.
Hal, same thing. I get the same thing for Hal. Like people said the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But experienced and at an expert level of experience,
I'll tell you something interesting. Now that we're talking about it, I'm thinking, when the whole Belafonte thing, when the biography came out and the documentary, that was 20 2011, I believe.
Mhm.
And I went down to my bookstore down here and I walked in and there was a big display of the book. And okay, so I pick it up and I go straight to the index.
Yep.
And I find Dad's name a few times and I read, it goes straight to those pages. Da, da,
Mhm.
da, da, da. Yes,
Mhm.
okay, fine. I read. And I get to this one section, which is about Harry's a stint in Vegas.
Mhm.
And this is the story of how, from Harry's perspective, the how and why his relationship with Dad ended.
Mhm.
Okay, it was about this, and it was
Mhm.
about this big agent. I forget the name. It wasn't Mike Ovitz. It was a,
Yeah.
Swifty Lazar or somebody. It was somebody, one
Oh,
of these,
Swifty. Right
you
on.
know,
Okay.
I don't know, some big Hollywood agent
It's a great poem.
who was a heavy hitter
Yeah.
and who had the juice to put Harry into have him do whatever it was, 2 weeks in Vegas or
Yeah.
whatever it was,
Yep.
and how this was the juncture at which he had to dump the loser Jack Rollins because he was a coward. He used the word coward,
Wow.
and he's like, this was over his head, and this was he couldn't have negotiated this deal for me. And I think, and I was very, angry at the time, thinking like, wow, this is 60 years later, and this is what he's still,
Mhm.
this is how he interprets that. But now when I think about that perspective,
Mhm.
and I think about later on this moment with Letterman and Ovitz, it does make me question, actually, if there is a kernel of truth in that. Not that he was a coward. I would have never used that word to describe my father in any way.
Anybody who I have talked to says that your dad, and it's multiple people now at this point, say that your dad would stand up to anybody about anything that he felt was worth standing up
Was
to.
right.
And it was his, yeah, that's like, that's a
But
hallmark of people who knew Jack and the things that I've
that might be true,
only
but
heard that. The idea of coward is so
it's a
foreign.
strange choice of words for him. But I
Yeah.
do wonder if there was sort of like a finite point for him, like a
Mhm.
line in the sand where it was like, I'm this is what I do, and this is where I can take you. And
Yeah.
I may be perhaps not the guy to take
Yeah.
you, or I'm not interested in that.
Yep.
Exactly as you said, like I want to take the diamond, the piece of coal,
Yes. Yes.
and find the diamond.
Yes.
And somebody else can put it in the glitzy setting, gold setting that where it wants to sit.
I'm looking forward to asking this. This is a hallmark question that I am looking forward to asking multiple people,
Mhm.
because I think the perspectives are all going to be very interesting, but I think they're going to be pretty much all the same perspective.
Mhm.
When you think about this idea of this guy, again, I love the description of, yeah, you'll never see a picture with the bags under his eyes because he spent so much time in the clubs and he didn't go home. He was the guy who would stay there later than anybody else. He was on the hunt. He was like a bloodhound. He was on the hunt looking for those pieces of coal that you're talking about. Like clearly that was something that he was
Yeah.
passionate about and could see it that he was good at. But again, yeah, it just, to me, it's just the irony. Like Ovitz doesn't exist if it's not for Jack and the blueprint that he created. And you look at William Morris, how big they are. Like you look at something like the WWE and the UFC are owned by a company called TKO that came from Endeavor, which
Right.
is a management for like this
Right.
all goes back to your dad.
Right.
And it's ironic to me. Ovitz went on to run Disney after, like
Right.
crazy stuff, and literally just kind of following the blueprint, but bringing
But you have to
a
have,
modern youth vitality to it.
for sure. But you also have, so you needed the Jack Rollins and the whoever else
Yep.
to pave that way. But then you also need the kind of hubris and ego to be that person to then go on to run Disney and think that you can. And so
Yeah.
this is something that would have been an anathema to my father. Like,
Yep, there we go. There we go. Yeah.
it just would have been just, bleh. Why would you, and why? No, he would
Yeah.
never have in 1,000 years have considered such a thing. So there you go.
From the very start of this show, I think maybe the first time I might have mentioned it might have been to Steve O'Donnell early on in one of the first, within the first 20 episodes. I might have mentioned it to Dreesen, whatever. I have always had a fascination about your dad. My very first conversation I had with Rick Sheckman was about your dad. It's the very first conversation. He was talking about the plane ride episode and what he and your dad were up to during the plane ride episode. And that was one of my very first conversations with Rick was about.
I love that picture. I can see him right there.
It's from his memorial. His niece gave that to me at the end of the memorial, and it's this show doesn't exist without Shecky. It doesn't exist without him. And I will never. It happened during an episode, Francesca. During an episode, it came to me that I had now been doing the Letterman podcast longer with him gone than when I had been doing it with him here, him helping me, and it fucked me up. Like it really did. I'm just he is just.
What happened? What did he die from?
It's complicated.
Okay.
We'll just use broad strokes. He had collapsed and he had been found probably a day later. And in that time, and in that time, I think some things had set in and the body just kind of went and shut down is that's how I would describe that as best I can and feel it's appropriate for me to say it. But yeah, it was I literally talked to him the day before he was found on the phone, and the last thing I said to him was "I love you," and it was just one. And Rick and I were like I would say that because I'm a big cuddly, as you know, I'm a big cuddly like relationship. That's who I am, right? And Rick is very much not that guy. And so there were times where we would be talking on the phone or something. I'm like, "Oh, Rick, thank you so much. I love you, man." And then it was like this that awkward thing that guys have. Where it's like, oh, hey, brother. Hey, no, I love you, man.
Back at you.
Yeah. It was, we actually had a few of those along the way. And I always liked them, but he had been sick and he was about to go on a cruise. And the reason I phoned him, was I had an episode with, Jeff Martin and Jerry Mulligan on at the same time. And I phoned him up and I said, "Hey man, I'm going to send you the Zoom link just in case." Because he always said, I'll never come on the show. But I know that there was a part of him where he thought he would, like at some point. Like it was a little bit of, he was my consigliere. He was my Tom Hagen, and he loved that. But he would play with the idea, oh, maybe I'll come on this week. Like he would say that. And
that's a good invitation.
That's, but I called him up and I said, "Okay, I got Jerry and Jeff coming on in 15 minutes. I said, "But I know you won't come on, but I'm going to send you the link anyway." He's like, "Wow." And I said, "But tomorrow you're jumping on the plane to go to Florida and you're going on a cruise and it's your first trip again since the pandemic and all that stuff. And I just got to say, Rick, I hope the sun heals you and I hope that you feel like, and I hope it's a great trip. And dude, I love you, man. I just thank you so much. And I love you so much." And he's like, "We'll talk soon." And
that was
the next day he was found. That was on a Tuesday. Nice. On the next day he was found. And then it wasn't very long in the hospital after that. But,
jeez.
But he had a reverence for your father. I mean, and think about it. Like when you think about the cinephile that Rick was, of course he would have reverence for your father, like he had reverence for your dad.
Yeah.
And, it was the first thing he and I ever talked about when we went past the online thing. It was the first story he ever told me was a story about your dad.
Wow.
And I've been fascinated ever since. And hopefully this is a path we will continue to move down. We've talked about it a little bit on the show here. We're trying to figure it out to get this out there to take Yep. Whatever that looks like.
So can I just, as long as I have you, just do you want to get off of this and then I'll
tell me some other stuff?
And do the business of this other of the other project, or
Francesca and I are going to talk business. So we're gonna end the show.
Which is not for your ears.
Yeah, not yet. Hopefully not yet. I just want to say thank you for I've really enjoyed becoming friends with you and Hillary. Like and Steve and like I feel like you're all just family, and I adore both of you. I adore you
Thank
very,
you.
very much. And
I feel the
so,
same way.
oh, well, thank you so much for this. And thank you for, I know this isn't something that might be your favorite thing in the world to do. And so I just want to say thank you very much for letting me take
Welcome.
advantage of our dynamic and you coming on here today and sharing some of these
I'm
things.
happy to.
It means the world to me, Francesca. It really,
I'm
really
so
does.
glad. I'm glad.
We'll do, you know what? Stay on here while I do the outro.
Okay.
The Letterman podcast has one sponsor only. It is hello-deli.com. Rupert G may not own the Hello Deli anymore, but he still owns hello-deli.com, where you can, the only place where you can get official Late Show with David Letterman merchandise, mugs and hats and shirts and all that kind of stuff. So go on to hello-deli.com. It's all throwback. It's been 10 years since Letterman signed off the last time for late night almost, and from the late night show. So it's throwback stuff. I just saw a shirt, a picture this week of Miles Teller, the actor Miles Teller, and he's wearing a Late Show with David Letterman shirt. It's on a boat. It's so cool to see that. Go to hello-deli.com. That's where you get the shirts and stuff from. This has been another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. That is Francesca Rollins. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.